Started on the Industry and Labor Full Committee. And before we get started, as normal, we will have a word of prayer, and I'm going to ask Representative Broderick to do that.
Let us pray, please. Most generous and gracious Heavenly Father, we bow in reverence and thanks for all the blessings you bestow on us. Lead us today, guide us. May all our actions, words, and deeds be acceptable to you. We ask these things in your precious Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Let me make just a couple of announcements of what we're going to do today. We're going to hear two bills. We're going to hear first House Bill 947 by Representative Clark. It is my intention, unless there's some reason not to, it is my intention to take action on that bill today. I know that's a little bit different than what we normally do. We normally do a subcommittee and full committee, but because of what I think is the simplicity of this bill, as well as the fact that we're in day 24, we've agreed to do that. And then the other bill, House Bill 660, is really only a hearing only, and we'll have some testimony on that and comments, and so that's the posture. And so with that, Representative Clark, why don't you take to the mic up there and tell us about your measure, House Bill 947, and to ensure that we've all got the same right LC number, I have 36, which we know who that is, don't we, Sean Marie? 2484. So why don't you go ahead and start, Representative Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
You raise the mic up so we can hear you a little bit.
Sure. Thank you.
Can everybody hear him?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, bring before you request direct deposit to their account from the employer. Put that on the paper card. There are a few questions that may come up. I think I've spoken with some of the members of the committee already.
Why don't we hold off on the questions for a moment and just find out whether we have anybody here today that wants to testify. I don't know if we had anybody sign up, Craig. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to make a statement either for or against this? Kyle, go ahead. If you don't mind, Representative, let's take a little testimony here and see if the members have any questions after Kyle Jackson with NFIB makes his statement.
My name is Kyle Jackson, represent NFIB small employers here in the state. We appreciate Representative Clark bringing this bill to you all. We certainly support more options for employers, particularly with employees. This is a route they want to go. I know other states are starting to see this as a popular trend. We would support the measure and ask for your consideration.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Jackson?
Chairman, I want to apologize for being a little tardy, but I guess my clock ain't as well. My question is, I didn't get a chance to see the fees. Didn't know if fees were associated with that. I mean, to the employee at all?
That's probably a question more to the author. I want to find out if
Okay,
we have any more
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. Just keep, any other testimony, anybody here in the audience that would like to speak in behalf or against? Okay, then go right ahead, Representative.
Okay. I'm
Ask
sorry.
the question.
Yes, my question was the fees.
Yes. There are fees associated, well, there can be fees associated with the use of a payroll card, and this bill requires that an employer would have to present those fees to the employee so that they can make the selection of their choice. So, yes, this bill requires full disclosure of any fees associated with a payroll card.
In other words, we don't have in law what those fees are, but if they choose, whatever company the client company or the company that's doing this chooses, they will know what the fees are and they will disclose that so that that employee, before they sign up, they know what the respective fees are. And it's reasonable to think that there are some customary fees, just like there are with any banking account that a person may have also, correct?
Or check cashing, because some people who don't have, and according to the federal government, there are 11% of employees out there across the country that don't have, national perspective, that don't have checking accounts. So they could potentially also have fees, or would have fees with check cashing. I do want to point out in response to your question, Representative Dewey, because I had that same question, and but appreciate that this bill requires that they full disclosure. But also, we should point out to everyone that there may not be any fees associated, depending on whether they're in the network or not. For instance, according to just Citi, of course, there's different banks that issue these cards. But according to, for instance, Citi Group, they provide 60,000 surcharge-free machines. So there's not necessarily going to be any fees depending on whether in network or out. So thank you, Representative.
Thank you. Can I follow, Mr. Chairman?
Sure, go right ahead.
When I do this, I always try to do it as thoroughly as I can by being one of the employees, because I also want to know that do the cards expire at all? I mean, I want to, is that a question, or is that something in law that's in the legislation that says the card will expire? For instance, I don't want to say, this is my question: will the card expire?
Cards will expire, yes, at a certain point, just like any credit card or debit card.
And my money on, sort of follow up with my money on the card, the debit, because, it is a payroll check.
Right. It's my understanding that you don't load it into the actual card. It's loaded into an account, and the debit card accesses the account when they use that. That's my understanding, and if someone wants to correct me. So for example, in this snowstorm, you wouldn't have to put the money on the card. They simply put it into their account, and so you have that card. That card just simply is like any debit card. It gives you access to that money.
Which there would have been some happy employees this past week during the snowstorm if they'd have had that option. And again, this is just another option for them, but if they'd had that option. Also, I'd point out too that checks expire too if they're not, if they're not
Right.
cashed.
That was okay. I guess mine was more so to the fees and making sure that it was all disclosed. And I think that's in the bill.
Yes, sir.
But I
Thank
wanted
you
just
for
to make
bringing that
sure
up.
that they had the option.
I agree with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it is in the bill.
Thank you. And I believe Representative Kirby here has experience with his company using these cards, and so we'll let him make a statement or a question about
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes to exactly what you're saying, Dewey. At Certainty at Sangamon, we had this option for our employees. It's an account that's set up, so when he says the card expires, just like your own debit card or Visa card, there's an expiration date on it, so they'll send you a new one. But the account doesn't expire, the money's in there. All right, the fee, the bank charge was the same as their regular checking account, I believe it was $7 a month, the company that set that up. So just like any other typical, no interest bearing checking accounts, $7 a month, $10, whatever the bank charge is. Company has no fees, they charge the employees at all, so it wasn't an impact to them. Just like any other network system where they withdrew money, if it's in the network, most of them were no charges associated. When you're traveling and you use a different network on your bank card, you might get hit with that $2.50 or whatever it is. But
it made a very good option for a lot of employees that didn't have a checking account, didn't want the direct deposit, and then we actually also gave them the option. Our system was able to set up a direct deposit and this card, so they could take a half their net pay and put it in their direct account, and then put one on a card to, I guess, keep it away from their spouse or whoever they didn't want to know where the money was going. But it was one option that most of the employees really liked.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Clark, on expiration, because again, follow up on Representative McLean, my debit card, credit card expires 4, 5, 6 years, that's an expiration date. If that's going to be the case, or it has like a 30, 90-day expiration date, or because when we say about expiration date, you look at your credit card, your debit card, you have years until that card expires. And my question is on expirations. Again, it will be the same as a usual credit card, debit card, or it will be a specific, like for a 30-day, because when you buy a gift card, for example, you have an expiration date. Maybe sometimes it's 90 days, sometimes it's a year. And that's where I'm confused a little bit about the expiration date. Is it's going to be the same, because we're putting it as the same as a credit card or a debit card. Well, that has years to be expired. If that would be the case?
My understanding, Representative Marin, is that yes, it's like a debit card, same time frame for expiration.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for asking that.
Yes, in fact, it is a debit card. It just happens to be linked to the payroll direct deposit. That's exactly right. Any other questions of the author? All right. What's the will of the committee?
Mr. Chairman, I move to pass.
All right. We have a motion and second. Any further discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Bill moves to rules.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. The next bill that we have a. You have a question? No. Oh. Is Representative Pack here? Oh, there is. Okay. But before you start, Representative Pack, you go ahead and stand up here. Let me make a statement here. I know that I made the statement to several people yesterday and today. Let me just make sure that I'm on record of saying this. First of all, this is a hearing only. We're not going to take action on this. I also want to publicly thank all of the great lobbying efforts that go on, whether it's on these grounds or grounds all over the state of Georgia. My daughter, when she did her senior paper, she came to the Capitol and mirrored a lobbyist for a couple of days and wrote her paper on the value of lobbying. So let me first of all say I believe in lobbying. I think they do a great job. A number of them do. And I also want to say that this is in no way an attempt to make a statement against lobbying or even the fact that taxpayer dollars can go towards lobbying. Matter of fact, I want to applaud both ACCG and GMA here in the President's. They probably haven't heard that in a long time, have they? So I hope you can pick yourself up off the ground there, Clint, so it's okay. But no, they do a great job. They really do. That doesn't mean we always agree on things, and sometimes things get pretty heated. But I know that the purpose of this is not to embarrass anybody or to bring anything. I think it's just that in this era of transparency, when we went through the ethics legislation over the last several years and all those things, we've got a lot of citizens that really want to make sure that tax dollars are being spent wisely, and they want to know. And I think that the author, when the author did this, I can't speak for him, I'll let him talk in a moment, but I think that was part of it, just to bring a transparency, because what happens is we find ourselves where we've got varying groups of taxpayer-funded lobbyists all lobbying in an environment, sometimes against and for, and I just think it's important for us to recognize that that does happen. I'm not saying it's bad, but it does happen. So again, I appreciate that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Representative Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I bring before you, for your consideration, substitute to HB 660 LC 287067S. I don't know if you have that. The purpose of this bill actually is, in fact, transparency. I do realize that without being part-time legislators and without government affairs individuals to inform us of the specific issues that impact various interest groups that they represent, that our job would be very, very hard. The reason this bill came about, if you read the original bill, I don't know if you had a chance to read that, and versus the substitute, what I'll present, was it came about because during the T-SPLOST debate, and there's a companion bill, 659, that's filed. I think Chairman Fleming, who sits on government affairs, heard that bill on the subcommittee as well. It has to do with transparency. The taxpayers and our constituents generally don't know what the tax money that they're paying to the local governments are being used for. In an effort to try to bring more transparency, that's why 660 was born. Initially, the draft of the bill actually required disclosure of all government affairs activities, and in a concept of kind of union dues and also state bar dues, if you disagree with some of the lobbying that the organization does, you have an option to actually pull your or opt out of your dues being used for advocacy and government affairs purposes. That was the original bill as drafted, and I wanted to give that option to the taxpayers. If the taxpayers did not agree that their tax money should be used to fund lobbying for certain things that they don't agree with, then they should have an option to opt out. Now, in addition to thinking more about the logistics of it, obviously your tax bill, your portion of the government affairs expenditure by the local government would be very minuscule. So opting out, although we make a very strong policy statement, I think logistically that's probably not a very effective or a feasible thing to do. So the committee sub I have in front of you is actually going towards more of the transparency. And we narrow the type of things that we want to be disclosed, and we use a property tax bill for that purpose. Since property taxes, every homeowner gets it, and they file ad valorem taxes. And there are certain things that, the fees and things that you are actually paying and what your fee goes for. Matter of fact, Gwinnett County, I think, does a great job in terms of disclosing what their fee goes to if their website is very, very good. But there's lack of transparency between some of the things that the taxpayer money or taxpayer-funded government affairs folks are lobbying for. And I'm just trying to narrow down one aspect of it. If you look at subsection B, starting in 25, it's a long paragraph, and it covers a couple things. Number one, it just says, it captures people, the activities of government affairs. So you have salaried people who are lobbyists, and you also have contract individuals who are lobbyists, and those expenditures should be aggregated and disclosed. In addition, it captures, I believe, what ACCG and GMA does. These organizations and municipalities pay dues to organizations that advocate for them. There's really nothing wrong with that. I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that's Mr. Mueller here is a very excellent resource. He's a very good government affairs person, and I talk to him all the time as a resource. But I do think that the taxpayers should know that sometimes the county actually uses the government affairs position to advocate for new taxes. And constituents just don't know that that's actually happening. So in order to bring more transparency, this bill, if passed, will require that on a tax bill, that if the local complete amount of government affairs related expenses that the county using, including dues paid to organizations that advocate for certain things, ACCG and GMA will be included. And the secondary disclosure that's required is whether or not during the previous tax year, so in Gwinnett County, for example, the tax bill goes out in October now, just once, and the session will be over by then generally, whether or not any of the funds were used to advocate for a new tax. That's all we were trying to do. Because I do think that most people will understand that government relations folks, even at the county level and the municipal level, is very, very important to make sure that we pass policies that are even and fair and make sure that we're not impacting local governments. But at the same time, I have heard several people, including my constituents, who had a problem during the T-SPLOST debate and advocacy where taxpayer money was being used to advocate for a passage of a tax. So that's why the bill came about, to bring more transparency and information provided to the taxpayers about what, in fact, what are they advocating for, and only limited to new taxes and fees, not about the renewals, just the new ones. And I believe it's a good policy for the bill. I understand that there might be some things in the edges we probably need to work on. But I've kind of done an informal poll. It's very, very popular with all citizens of whichever party or independent, because they believe that they want to know if, in fact, that taxpayer money is being funded to advocate for taxes on the citizens, and that's the purpose of the bill. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Before we get any questions, let me see is there anyone in the audience that would just like to go on record or discuss any of this? Anybody with our association? Sure, Mr. Mueller. Yeah. Thank you. Just stand right there, and then we'll come back to you, Representative Pack, after we've had some comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I got to say it's a treat to come before this committee. I don't get to come before this committee very often. You all don't take up a lot of issues dealing with county government, but this one obviously does impact our organization directly, the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia, and I'm the legislative director. I've been doing that for about 16 years now. I want to say from the outset, first of all, we are very much in favor of transparency. We've never tried to hide from anything that the county spend money on. I think that that's part of government. It needs to be accountable to the public, and it can't be accountable if the public doesn't know how their tax dollars are being spent. I also want to say that I've not had a chance to review the substitute bill, so I'm a little bit of a disadvantage here. I've obviously got the original bill that was introduced. I'll make a few comments, but knowing that, I don't know what all is in the substitute bill other than what was just explained to you. Well, even if I got a copy of it, I don't think I could review it while I'm standing here. I will get a copy of it after the committee meeting, though. Thank you. I do want to say that there's a lot of ways that we try to disclose the government, county government, city government, schools, and by the way, schools aren't even included in the original bill that I saw. It was just counties and cities, so I was wondering why schools weren't included. But government in general tries to disclose to the public what they're spending their funds on. And arguably, everybody's got a different interest in what local government spends their money on. We have a budget. We have an annual audit. Both the budget and the annual audit are required to be filed on an annual basis to the Carl Vinson Institute of Government. We also file our audit with the State Department of Audit. So that information is out there and it's accessible by anyone. And you can look at all 159 counties and all the cities in the state. It's one-stop shop, one website where you can get all that information. Using the tax bill, though, for trying to disclose specific types of expenditures, we just don't feel that's an appropriate use of the tax bill, because you could go on and on and on. I'm sure there's a variety of things that the public would like to know how much you're spending money on. And again, hopefully a lot of that is already disclosed in the audit and in the budget document that are online. We get into a lot of extra costs, though, when you start trying to itemize everything on the property tax bill. And in fact, Gwinnett County was mentioned, and they do itemize a number of things on their tax bill, but those are all set out in law. Those are special tax districts where they had to pass an ordinance creating the special tax district for a specific purpose, or it's a fee that's tied to a specific service. So there's legal problems with just picking something that's a general fund expenditure and trying to break that out on the tax bill itself. I'm not going to go into several of the just the administrative and legal issues that we see with the legislation. However, I just wanted to go on record and say, we're for transparency. In fact, I know that the chairman of this committee asked us last year how much we were spending on advocacy efforts. And a lot of people don't know that our association does a lot more than just advocacy. That's my area of ACCG. I've got a staff of 4. That's what we do. But we've got 80-something employees. And the vast majority of our employees of our organization are doing training for county commissioners. We're doing insurance. We're doing right to retirement. We're doing a lot of other things other than advocacy.
And I'm going to compliment you. You responded very quickly on that with a very factually driven number, and I appreciate that. So.
And I want to thank the chairman for that request. We have not had that request before, and it was difficult, actually. We had to go through our own budget and try to determine how much are we really spending on advocacy, because I know a lot of our time, even the lobbyist staff time spent outside of the session, is doing other things other than advocacy. I teach a lot of courses. I'm about to teach an advanced tax course coming up at our annual conference. Well, that's not really advocacy. That's just training our county commissioners across the state. So some of my time is spent on other things other than advocacy. But for any of you all on this committee that want that information, we'd be glad to share with you how much resources our association has to spend on advocacy efforts on behalf of the 159 counties. And I tell you, as being a lobbyist for the association, it's never enough. I know I have Sarah, she's interning with us this session. She's a third-year law student, and I think she can testify just in what she's seen today that we can't keep our fingers on all the different bills that are coming at us on a daily basis down here. Just trying to make sure our county commissioners are aware of what's going on down here, and make sure legislators understand what the impact is on their local governments. But any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Could I ask you a question,
Sure.
please? The information you gave me was very helpful, and I'm just going back to what Representative Pack is trying to ultimately get to. And again, we're not taking action on this today, but just in a moving forward basis.
Right.
My county, as an example, I know of several, quote, contracts they have. They may not call them lobbyists, but they're taking on advocacy positions for a variety of things in our community, at the state. So we have two things, I guess, when it comes to ACCG or the counties. We have the actual counties of them having independent contracts or whatever they're doing.
Right.
You may or may not contract out any of the services. I don't know if you do it all in-house. But would it be reasonable? I'm just a question. Would it be reasonable to think that, one of the things that we did in the ethics bill was for us to have our disclosure for the time period right before session started. Would it be an appropriate request of our respective counties and or ACCG and other groups to ask for a similar amount on the previous year leading up to that year, whether it be a calendar year or through October or something, to show what those advocacy line items were or expense items were? Would that be a reasonable request, or is that going to is that going to consume a lot of extra tax dollars just to give us a number that really is meaningless?
Well, quite frankly, I think that information legally has to be provided now if you ask for it. As you all know, we are subject to the open records law, and I see Representative Fleming over there who's very familiar with the open records, open meetings law, and if you ask any county or city for that information, by law now they are supposed to provide it to you. Now, does it get difficult?
But if I do it through an open records request, I suddenly have an adversarial relationship is what I have found in those cases. I'm saying more as a proactive way for you to say, we just want to share with the General Assembly what we've done in the last 12 months.
Yeah, I don't see it as being adversarial. I think, again, you're talking about spending taxpayer dollars, and the taxpayers have a right to know, and everybody in this room is a taxpayer, both state and local taxes. So if anybody in this room, any member of the General Assembly wants to know what local governments are spending on that and makes the request, again, I don't see that as adversarial. We'd be glad to provide you that information. But however you want to request that information, we would be glad to work with you to get you that information.
Representative Fleming, your button's flashing, I believe. Do you have a question or a comment?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And some of these were for the author, but it'd be fine to speak with
I think we're in a very informal posture.
Okay.
If you'd like to save them for the author, that's fine too. So.
Yes, I would at this point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Mr.
Appreciate it, Mr. Mueller. Anybody else? Tom, come on up.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Tom Gale, and I'm with the Georgia Municipal Association, and pleased to be in front of your committee today.
I just missed you from my old time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's like old times. I, like Clint, have not had a chance to see Representative Pack's substitute, but I think that I think that it's important to mention to this committee that GMA over 80 years ago was created primarily because there were some tax changes that would have impacted city residents that were being contemplated at the state legislature. And so city officials at that time, 5 cities, I think it was the mayor of Savannah, the mayor of Atlanta, and a few other large cities, decided to come together and begin advocacy, not necessarily for city government, but for city taxpayers. And I think that at heart, that is still a common goal that we share with ACG, in that we've got mayors and council members who are passionate about making sure that their city taxpayers are protected from potential tax shifts or tax discussions that are happening at the legislature. That, of course, has expanded to other areas of advocacy, and as the sophistication of the General Assembly and the times have changed much in these 80-something years since GMA has been formed. But since the formation of GMA, we've managed to become an organization that is primarily providing types of insurance, types of pension programs. Representative Bryant, I think, is even a pensioner for his former term of office in city government, and GMA handles his pension. We do a lot of things to help local governments with all types of telecom, all types of services that are, in some cases, what many would consider pedestrian. Like, you've got a new clerk who has never been a clerk before. How does she do her job? We offer training. We give her assistance. We have peer-to-peer networks. So GMA has morphed into an organization that as an aside almost does advocacy, but that still is one of our core functions. Like Clint said, we are not opposed to transparency, but we would like to make sure that anything that's put in place would be practical, not just for GMA, but for our city governments. We've got 519 members. There are 536 cities in the state. There are cities huge like Atlanta and cities small like Funston or Hiltonia. Many of you may not even know where these cities are or their size. And my guess is that that a city of Funston will join GMA, or a small county like Clay County will join ACCG, primarily for the services that aren't related to advocacy. They will have access to our attorneys if they have specific questions about how to follow the open meetings, open records law, things of that nature. So so we're willing to continue the discussion, and we appreciate the comments that the chair had about our organization and our counterparts over at our sister.
Thank you very much. And I will again say, when I chaired governmental affairs, we all agree, I think, that we all work for the same constituents. I would say that the only time, or mainly when there was ever a disagreement between the various bodies, it was probably because one of us might have felt like that it was less about the citizen, more about the organization, and that's a battle we all deal with, working, whether we work for the, we say we work for the state or the cities that can, but we all work for the people, and so it's very important for us to stay focused on who our customer really is. And again, publicly, I want to say both of y'all, your organizations do a good job. But any questions of Tom?
Thank
all
you,
right.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. No other one in the audience wishes to speak? I'll let the representative author come back up, and I know that Representative Fleming had a question or a comment. Do you still have that? Yes, sir. There you go.
Representative Pat, thank you for bringing the bill today. As I was reading through the bill, I was trying to go through my mind as to how this would actually work. The chairman of my county commission, a guy named Ron Cross, he was an advocate of the T-SPLOST. He was the chairman of a local regional group that advocated for it. I know he came to my Kiwanis Club. I know he gets paid a very small salary by the county. I know that he has a cell phone that's paid for by the county. He may have a car or get paid mileage. Now, when he came to my Kiwanis Club to speak under your bill, are they going to have to calculate the percentage of his salary that was spent doing that, the mileage in his car, and the amount of, if he used his cell phone while he was there, and put that on the tax bill?
I think if you read the substitute, it only covers non-elected officials, but people hired for specific purpose of advocating.
I'm looking at 2876S, 7067S. And there's a carve out.
No, the intent was to get the paid government affairs folks. We know that mayors and elected officials are going to advocate for positions. And there's always a check and transparency on that because they have a voting record and they also have a meeting record. I'm trying to get at the areas where when you hire somebody to do something for you, that's not going to be in the transparent
I'm
way.
looking at line 15. It says the salaries of all officials.
Right.
My county commissioner chairman has a salary.
Right.
Therefore, the way I
Whose
read
job-
this, when he went to the Kiwanis Club to speak, his salary had to be calculated in that.
But if you look at line 16, and it says whose jobs involve government affairs activities, and you go down to line 22, it defines government affairs activities as functions and actions undertaken directly or indirectly to support or oppose legislation before the General Assembly, or to influence the governor to approve or veto. So we're talking about not speaking about a particular issue at a Kiwanis Club, but coming over here to lobby for a passage of
All right,
new
let
tax.
me ask you this one.
Certainly.
If Kasim Reed walks across the street to the state capitol
Yes.
and thanks the governor for putting in the budget money to help us dredge the port of Savannah, and his police officers walk across the street with him, as they usually do, his escorts, do we have to calculate how much it costs for him to have them to come to ask the governor to sign the budget bill because he is on the city of Atlanta is advocating on behalf of the port of Savannah?
No, I think that's not necessarily a new fee. Or if you look at it, the whole. Remember, I cut back. The only thing that they need to calculate and disclose is if they're advocating for a new tax fee or revenue source. So there's a lot of policy reasons that elected officials advocate for. I have no problem with that. I think people know on record. If you ask a taxpayer, for example, you go down and ask the county taxpayer, a constituent in your district, and say, do you know the position that your county commissioner has taken on T-Splosh? And most people, yeah, I read in the paper. That's fine. That's great. But however, I think if you went back to your constituent and said, do you know how much money did your government spend to lobby us on a tax? And I will guarantee you none of them knows that. Nor do they even know that the organization that they pay actually advocated for a tax. That's what I'm trying to bring up. I'm not trying to prevent that. I'm just saying that I think bringing that to the attention of the taxpayer is a very, very important thing. Now, calculating exactly how much that they need to disclose, and I'll admit to you, Chairman Fleming, I think that probably needs to be flushed out, and I'll admit that. But the intent here on the bill here is to only cover those situations where your primary job, and it involves government affairs activity, to lobby us or the governor for a new fee or tax, penalty, or other similar revenue-enhancing measure. Because I think that's where the danger is. I think they expect elected officials to advocate for their constituents. I don't think anybody.
I don't have a problem at all with what I understand your intent to be. I'm asking, but of course we have to actually interpret what the words mean.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to get to. And the last example I would ask you of is every county that has their property tax collected.
Right.
They pay a minute percentage, 0.025, I think, to the Department of Revenue.
Mm-hmm.
So they're paying the Department of Revenue some funds. Okay. The Department of Revenue, I believe, regularly comes over to the Ways and Means Committee in the House and testifies before them quite often on measures affecting taxes that affect counties or cities.
Right.
So the counties are paying money to the Department of Revenue. The Department of Revenue is coming over to the Ways and Means Committee to testify on matters that affect taxes that affect counties. So does my county have to calculate how much the Department of Revenue spends on the guy that they pay to come over to testify before the Ways and Means Committee under your bill?
Representative Fleming, let me say one thing,
Yeah.
if I may interrupt. Sorry. I know some of you came in late. You may have not. This is a hearing only.
I know.
So I just want to make sure that I understand getting into the language, but I want to make sure that the idea was to just get this discussion going. I just want to make sure you knew that,
No,
and
I do.
anybody else that came
I do.
in. So,
I
okay.
do.
All right. Thank you. Sorry.
Chairman Fleming, I do think that if you think about it, any state agency, their
Right.
policy and the law says you can't take an advocacy position one way or the other.
Then
All
why
right?
do we require them to have lobbyist badges?
On tax. So if you have Department of Revenue and Ways and Means, they'll never tell you we're in favor of this tax. They'll never do it. And that's why, although they're required to register lobbyists, any money that they're paying the Department of Revenue would not be covered under this. Now, again, the focus is on the people who are hired specifically to lobby. We're trying to bring to light the expenditures and whether or not the taxpayer money is being used for the purpose of advocating for a new tax. And I know it's hearing only, Chairman, but I encourage you that when you have time, ask your constituents, do you know whether or not the county spent money advocating for a tax up here in General Assembly? And they probably don't. Matter of fact, my wife didn't even know that. And those of us who are in the Capitol all the time know this. We know this. But I think that there needs to be a little bit more transparency on that. Now, I will admit to you, property tax may not be the best vehicle. I'm open to an amendment on that. If you want to do a power bill, that's fine. I think the position taken by the local government was we should be able to disclose things on the property tax, or any fees and things like that. So since they like that, I was using that medium to disclose any other expenditures that they have.
Here was my point. I mean, I don't disagree with your intent. I really don't. But the words are very important in how they affect what you actually have to do. Unintended consequences. We're in business around here to fix what we messed up last year quite often. And as I read through this, all these things started going through my mind of how you figure out and calculate some of these things. And although I agree with the intent, I'm trying to figure out how functionally you put it into place and make it happen because of all the different tentacles that this thing could have. Thank you.
And again, I'd be open if you want to include the salary of the officials into the calculation. I'm open to that as well.
Thank you. Before we go to the next question, I just want to ask a question. I had not a similar bill, but I had a bill several years ago that got quite a stir. But the point is you made a statement, I agree with you, but we may not be on the same page on the rest of it. I think elected officials, they can do whatever they want to within the legal requirements of their job, in that the voters know what they do. I mean, my bigger concern has always been the non-elected officials. And so if, to use your example, if Mayor Kasim Reed walks across the street to advocate for something, I'm less concerned with that because he answers to the voters in Atlanta that elected him. I mean, that's his deal. I have found that, I think what your intent is more if they're paying maybe contractors or other people specifically to lobby, and or their staff members that have become de facto lobbyists because it's part of their job and they're a staff member, not an elected official. I always think the elected officials we answer to the voters, so just as a comment. And who do we have down here? Representative McLean, is that yours?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Pack, too. You know, I didn't get the substitute till a few minutes ago, too. So, but my only concern is that I know that I read where the other ones are optional tax. I mean, I respect transparency, but I saw that this was a new tax where these funds were coming from. I was just wondering where the funds were coming from. I mean, on your old one, you said it was an optional tax that was going to be put on the bill, and so, but I want to throw this away. So, but on this, it says nothing about where the funds are coming from to pay these folks or to.
I'm not quite sure if I understand your question.
Okay, well, if we could go back to your old on line 30 and 31, you said such amount shall be optional for the taxpayers to pay, and the tax bill shall notify the taxpayer. The taxpayer may deduct such amount from the total tax due and pay only the remaining amount of the tax due. Now that was on what you had on the old
original bill, yes.
Right. So I'm just but it's none of those words are on this, and so that's where I was going. I'm sorry.
Oh, you mean the opt-out provision? Yes, it was removed because I think logistically it would be very hard for the county and the cities to implement that opt-out. So, for example, to my neighbor in Gwinnett County, District 100, you know, your property tax bill and your portion of the government affairs expenditures that's attributable to your property tax will be less than 0.001 cent. Let's just, and that would be very hard for you to opt out and somehow deduct, and for you know, the county government to calculate what your new tax bill is. So I eliminated that, and I thought initially that would have been a very good policy, because you know, that's a way of participating in what your government is doing. But I changed it with a substitute, which eliminates the opt-out provision, but now it just says, just disclose it, how much that you're spending.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, members of the
Arthur,
committee.
we appreciate that. Appreciate the committee's action on the first bill, and for your attention in this. And this means adjourned. Thank you very much.